I'm sitting in my car right now because I can't even look at him. I just finished a 10-hour shift. The Beltway was a parking lot for 2 hours, and I'm done. I walked into the kitchen and immediately started on the dishwasher. It was making this rattling sound that felt like it was vibrating through my teeth. I shoved the plates into the bottom rack way too hard, just clinking the ceramic, because I was already on edge. Joseph didn't even look up from his phone. He just leaned against the granite counter and scrolled, his face completely blank. We live in one of those gated communities in the DC sprawl where everyone is obsessed with their former government rank or their corporate title. It's just the Beltway status game moved to a different zip code. Our HOA president, Brenda, treats the neighborhood bylaws like they're the Constitution. If she sees a trash can on the curb past 6 p.m., she sends a formal warning. I can't deal with another warning from her. If you don't take the trash out before Brenda walks through that door, I swear to God, Joseph, I told him. I'm getting to it, he muttered. He didn't move. He just shifted his weight against the fridge. I stopped mid-motion, holding a greasy pasta bowl. I've spent the last 3 years tracking every single cent that enters or leaves this house. I have a spreadsheet for utilities, one for groceries, and another for the kids' activities. We aren't poor, but the anxiety just sits in my chest like a stone. I need to know where the money goes. If a light bulb costs $4, I want to know why it cost $4. Joseph finally set the phone on the counter to grab some water. He left the screen facing up. A Venmo notification popped up on the banner. It was a payment for $250, and it had a winking face and a sparkling heart attached to it. My stomach did a slow roll. Victoria is Joseph's brother-in-law. They've always been close, but $250 for what? And the emojis? You don't send those to your brother-in-law. I just stared at the screen, still gripping the pasta bowl. Who is sending you $250? I asked. My voice sounded flat. Joseph jumped and nearly knocked over his water. He snatched the phone and shoved it into his pocket in one fast, panicked motion. It's nothing, Lisa. Just family stuff, he said. He wouldn't look at me. He started rubbing the back of his neck and glancing toward the hallway. Family stuff doesn't come with a wink and a heart, Joseph. What is it for? I don't have time for this, he replied, stepping back to put distance between us. Brenda is going to be here in 10 minutes. Just leave it alone. He walked out, leaving me with the rattling dishwasher and the smell of old food. As he headed outside, I saw our neighbor, Miller, stop by the curb. Miller only ever talks to us when it involves trash cans or cars. He asked Joseph if he was finally clearing the curb, and Joseph gave him this look, this pitying tight-lipped smile, and said, "Yeah, just trying to keep the peace at home." The way he said it made me feel like I was the crazy one. It made me doubt my own reaction. Like I was just some nagging wife instead of a woman who actually manages the finances of this household. An hour later, after the HOA meeting turned into a shouting match about the acceptable shade of beige for the perimeter fences, I went into the home office to find a stapler. The room smelled like old paper and Joseph's expensive cologne. I reached for the drawer and noticed a manila folder resting on the edge of the desk. He hadn't tucked it away in the filing cabinet where everything belongs. I pulled the folder open and found a document from the bank. It wasn't a statement. It was a notification for a home equity line of credit, a remortgage. The amount was staggering. It was a number that didn't fit into any of my spreadsheets. I felt a sharp coldness in my limbs. I remember the day we signed the original mortgage. I highlighted every single clause in yellow. We agreed on no new loans, no surprises. What are you doing in here? I spun around. Joseph stood in the doorway, his chest heaving like he'd just run a marathon to get there. Why is there a remortgage notice on your desk? I asked, holding the paper up. He stayed in the doorway with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. It's a business move. I'm handling it. You don't need to worry about the logistics? The logistics? Joseph, this is our house. This is the kids' equity. What business move requires a second mortgage without my signature? It's a startup, Lisa. A crypto thing. It's going to blow up, he said, looking at a spot on the wall. I just needed a little seed money. I was going to tell you once the returns hit. I didn't know what to say. I stood there for a minute looking at the bank logo. All the control I thought I had. The budgets, the plans. It felt like a joke. Suddenly, the argument wasn't just about the money. I started thinking about the practical side. If this becomes a separation, who even stays in the house? Who can afford it if he's leveraged our equity into a quattro thing? We didn't resolve the argument. We just let it simmer for 3 days. The tension made the house feel smaller. We stopped eating dinner together and only spoke in short, clipped sentences about the kids' schedules and the lawn. On Thursday evening, the tension broke. Joseph was in the kitchen, trying to open a jar of preserves, when he suddenly gasped. He dropped the jar, and it shattered across the tile, spraying red jam everywhere. He gripped the edge of the counter, his face turning a weird grayish color, and he slid down to the floor, clutching his chest. I panicked. I called 911, my voice shaking as I gave the dispatcher our address. While I waited for the ambulance, I scrambled to find his medical records and insurance card. I went to the safe in the closet and pulled out the folder with the health insurance paperwork. The complex, jargon-heavy documents that I handle because Joseph always claims he can't understand them. As I flipped through the pages to find the policy number, a small handwritten note fell out. It wasn't a medical note. It was a list of dates and amounts with the words, premium offset, written at the top. I looked at the entries. None of them matched our bank statements. I stared at the numbers, then looked at Joseph, who lay on the floor breathing in shallow, ragged gasps while the sirens wailed in the distance. Paramedics burst through the front door a few minutes later. Their heavy boots thudded against the hardwood, and the living room dissolved into a chaos of orange bags and shouting. I stood back, clutching that scrap of paper, and watched them hoist Joseph onto a gurney. He looked small, his face a grayish color, his eyes fluttering while they strapped him in. I almost dropped the note in the scramble. I shoved it into my pocket, the edges digging into my palm, and followed them out to the ambulance. 2 hours later, I sat in a hospital room that smelled like industrial cleaner and burnt coffee. The doctors stabilized Joseph, and he lay there hooked to a monitor that beeped in a steady, rhythmic pulse. He looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped against the thin pillow. I sat in the plastic chair beside him, with the premium offset note resting on my lap. What is this? I held the paper up. I kept my voice low. Joseph didn't look at me. He stared at the ceiling, his breathing still shallow. He shifted his weight, trying to get comfortable on the mattress. I don't know, he muttered. You don't know? Joseph, I found this in the insurance folder. It's a list of dates and dollar amounts, and none of these hit our joint account. He closed his eyes and sighed. It's probably just some old work stuff. I can't even remember writing it. I'm a bit preoccupied with the fact that my chest felt like it was in a vice. You're dodging me. These numbers are too specific. 412, 1,200. Where did this money go? He opened one eye and looked at me with a flat expression. You're overthinking this. You always do this. You turn every single receipt into a federal case. Just let it go for one night. He turned his head toward the wall. I stayed there for a long time, listening to the monitor. He didn't deny it. He just made me feel hysterical for noticing a secret ledger in our own safe. By Saturday morning, the doctors discharged Joseph with a prescription for blood pressure meds and a warning to reduce his stress. We drove home in silence, the Beltway traffic crawling at a snail's pace. I watched the brake lights of the car in front of us and thought about the equity in our house and the way Joseph had lied about the remortgage. Pulling into the driveway, I saw Miller standing by his mailbox. He wore those ridiculous cargo shorts he always wears, squinting at our curb. As I parked, he walked toward us, his eyes drifting toward the garage. Hey, Lisa, he called out. Hi, Miller. You guys got a new car? Or a visitor? There's a black sedan parked 2 houses down that's been there since Friday. It just idles most of the time. I thought maybe it was a contractor. But they aren't doing any work. A prickle of heat hit the back of my neck. I'm not sure, I replied. Just making sure, Miller said, glancing back at the street. Hoa gets touchy about long-term parking on the residential strips. Brenda already mentioned the overgrown hedge on the corner. I wouldn't want you guys getting a fine on top of everything. He walked away, leaving me standing there. I looked at Joseph. He was already halfway to the front door. He hadn't heard a word Miller said. For a second, I wondered if I was imagining things. Maybe the black car was a coincidence. Maybe the premium offset list was just some boring corporate reimbursement he'd forgotten about. I felt that flicker of doubt. The feeling that I'm just the controlling one. Once Joseph went upstairs to nap, I went straight to the home office. I didn't go for the safe this time. I sat down at the computer and opened the shared banking portal. I spent the next 3 hours staring at the screen until my eyes blurred. I pulled up my master spreadsheet, the one where I track every utility bill and grocery run, and laid the premium offset note beside it. I started cross-referencing. The numbers on the note didn't appear as withdrawals from our main account. They didn't appear in the savings. Searching through the transaction history, I found something. Small, recurring transfers. $50 here, $100 there. Went into an account I didn't recognize. It was a digital wallet linked to that crypto thing he'd mentioned. Looking at the dates, I realized the transfers happened on the same days as the entries on the premium offset list. The list wasn't a record of money coming in. It was a map of money he moved out of sight. My heart started to race. I thought about the practical side of this. If the remortgage was as big as that notice suggested, and he was funneling money into a failing startup, we were bleeding equity. I looked around the room, the mahogany desk, the expensive blinds. If we separated, who could actually afford to keep this place? If we owed more on the house than it was worth because of a business move I never signed off on, we were both trapped. My phone buzzed with a notification. It was a text from Victoria, Joseph's brother-in-law. Hope Joe is feeling better. Let me know if you guys need anything this weekend. Sending love. I stared at the message. I thought about that $250 Venmo payment with the winking face and the heart. I thought about how close Victoria and Joseph always were. Walking into the bedroom, I saw Joseph asleep. His chest rose and fell slowly. He looked peaceful, almost innocent. I didn't wake him. Instead, I went back to the office and printed out the last 6 months of the digital wallet transfers. I laid the papers face down on the kitchen counter, right next to the fruit bowl. Then, I sat down at the table and opened my laptop to look up the current market value of our home. I sat in the kitchen with my laptop open, watching the Zillow estimate for our house flicker as the page refreshed. I live in that suffocating sprawl outside DC, where your entire identity is basically your job title and how many minutes you spend idling on the Beltway every morning. I looked at the number and felt a hollow pit in my stomach. The market peaked, but Joseph took out such an aggressive loan against our equity that we were barely breaking even. If I had to leave him tomorrow, I'd be lucky to find a 2-bedroom rental in a neighborhood where the HOA doesn't send you a formal warning because your grass is a 1/4 inch too long. I noticed a stray piece of paper tucked under the fruit bowl. A memo with the name Bauer and some scribbled figures. I picked it up just as the floorboard creaked. Joseph stood in the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame. He wore those old gray sweatpants and a t-shirt with a coffee stain on the collar. He still had that sallow post-hospital tint to his skin, but his eyes snapped to the paper in my hand. "Why are you digging through my things?" he asked. His voice sounded raspy, barely a whisper. "I'm not digging, Joseph. This was on the counter." "Who is Bauer?" He didn't answer. He walked to the fridge and stared blankly at the shelves for a few seconds before grabbing the orange juice. He drank straight from the carton, his throat moving in slow, rhythmic gulps. "It's for a project," he muttered, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Put it back." He got defensive so fast it felt like a slap. He didn't explain the memo. He just shut down. I let it go, but the way he snapped over a random piece of paper made the air in the room feel heavy. The next morning, I walked to my car and saw our neighbor Brenda standing by her trash cans. Brenda only talks to me when she has a complaint about the bins or when a strange car parks in the cul-de-sac. "That black sedan in your driveway yesterday," Brenda said, squinting. I didn't recognize it. "You have company?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe a delivery? It sat there for an hour, just idling." I thanked her and got in my car, but Brenda's comment made me doubt myself. I didn't remember a black sedan. I wondered if I was just becoming the crazy wife, projecting my financial anxiety onto everything. I spent the rest of the morning dealing with the health insurance paperwork for Joseph's recovery. The kind of dense, bureaucratic nightmare that nobody else in this house even attempts to understand. I'm the only one who knows which forms go to which provider and the responsibility felt like another weight I couldn't share. Around 4 o'clock, I sat down to clear my inbox. I volunteer as the coordinator for the kids' PTA, which mostly means I argue with parents about cupcake quality and chase down reimbursement forms. An email from Sarah, the treasurer, caught my eye. The subject line read, "Quick question. Reimbursement 402. I opened the email and saw a screenshot of a process payment. Sarah had issued a reimbursement for event planning and venue scouting, totaling $3,000 to a vendor called Bauer Consulting. My heart didn't race. It just slowed down into a heavy thud. Victoria Bauer, Joseph's brother-in-law, doesn't have a consulting firm. He barely has a steady job. I clicked the attached PDF. The signature at the bottom wasn't Sarah's. It was a scanned copy of Joseph's signature. Even though he has zero authority over the PTA's money, I felt numb. I opened a new tab and searched for Spring Gala Retreat. Nothing came up. Then I remembered the romantic weekend. Joseph promised for our anniversary months ago. The one he said he finally budgeted for. He kept the details a secret, claiming it was a surprise. I pulled up the digital wallet records I'd printed earlier. I compared the dates of the premium offset transfers to the PTA's disbursement dates. They lined up perfectly. He wasn't just losing money in a crypto startup. He was laundering PTA funds through a fake consulting fee to fund a life he couldn't afford. I dialed Sarah. "Hey, Lisa. I was just about to email you again," she said, sounding bright and oblivious. "That reimbursement to Bauer Consulting. Who authorized that?" There was a pause. "Joe sent over the paperwork a few weeks ago. He said he was helping a contact organize the venue and that the board gave a verbal okay. I didn't see a formal sign-off, but Joe was so insistent it was urgent for the deposit that I just pushed it through." "Is there a problem?" "A big one," I said. I leaned back and looked at a water stain on the ceiling. "Wait, is everything okay? If the venue fell through, we can get a refund, right?" "I'll call you back, Sarah." I hung up. Instead, I felt a cold, intense need for organization. I opened a new spreadsheet and titled it, Total Liabilities. I spent the next hour documenting every cent. I listed the remortgage, the wallet transfers, and the stolen PTA funds. I didn't think about the emotional betrayal. I thought about the legal implications. Embezzlement from a school organization is a police matter. I also thought about the house. If this ended in a separation, who could actually stay here? I looked at the equity again. If Joseph's debts wiped us out, I'd be fighting for a roof over my kids' heads while he played with digital coins. The front door opened. I heard Joseph talking to someone on his phone in the foyer. "I told you, the timing has to be perfect," Joseph said. He sounded energized, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "If we shift the remaining equity into the coin before the dip, we can cover the PTA gap in the loan. Just keep the car around the corner for now." "I don't want Lisa seeing you." I stood behind the hallway wall, the black sedan. Brenda wasn't imagining things. I know, he whispered. "Just give me a few days to get the paperwork sorted. She's suspicious, but she doesn't have the full picture yet." He hung up and stood there in the silence. I stayed hidden, clutching the PTA records. He mentioned the coin, but he didn't mention where the rest of the money went. He gave a half answer to a problem I hadn't even asked him about yet. I walked back into the kitchen and changed the password to our primary joint savings account. Then, I logged into the kids' college funds and moved them into a separate account in my name only. I worked fast, a frantic scramble of clicks, building a digital fortress. My phone buzzed. A text from the kids' group chat. "Can we order pizza tonight? Dad said he'd pay." I stared at the screen, then looked at my total liabilities spreadsheet. I didn't reply to the text. I opened my desk drawer, pulled out a folder of blank legal paper, and started listing every single account Joseph had access to. I sat there for hours, the list getting longer as the night went on. I checked off the shared credit cards, the emergency fund, and that small brokerage account I'd managed to keep hidden. My hands started cramping from how hard I was gripping the pen, but I didn't stop. I needed to see every single cent on paper. If I didn't control every dollar, I knew we were underwater. Joseph walked back into the office around 10. He didn't bother with the overhead light. He just leaned against the doorframe, letting the dim light from the hallway hit the carpet. He looked at the legal pad, then he looked at me. "Doing the accounting?" he asked. His voice sounded like a dry rattle in his chest. I didn't look up. I'm making sure we actually have a place to live, Joseph. He sighed and stepped into the room, reaching for the edge of the desk. I shifted my arm, blocking his view of the list. He stopped, his hand hovering in the air for a second before he just dropped it. About the PTA thing. It was a loan, he muttered. A temporary bridge. Once the coin hits the target, I'm putting it all back, plus interest. Sarah won't even know it was gone. Sarah already knows, I said. I finally looked at him. He looked smaller than he had a week ago. His shoulders hunched. His eyes kept darting toward the window where that black sedan had been idling. She called me 3 times this afternoon. The board is meeting on Monday. They're talking about a police report, Joseph. He blinked, his face going flat. They wouldn't do that. Not over $3,000. It's a misunderstanding. It's embezzlement, I told him. He turned away and walked toward the door. I'm handling it. Just stop with the spreadsheets for one night, please. The next few days were just a blur of calculated silence. I stopped arguing. I stopped asking about Victoria Bauer or the black sedan. I just functioned. I woke up, made the coffee, and spent my lunch breaks on the phone with a real estate attorney in the city who handles high-asset divorces. The legal fees alone were staggering. Just another liability I added to my list, but I paid them from my separate account. The social fallout hit first. In our neighborhood, your status is basically your job title and whether or not you can avoid HOA fines. So the news of the PTA theft spread fast. I saw Brenda at the mailbox on Tuesday. She didn't ask about the black sedan this time. She just gave me this tight, pitying smile and asked if I needed anything. While she looked pointedly at my driveway. It was the kind of kindness that felt like someone checking to see if you were already dead. Joseph, meanwhile, was convinced he was one pump away from saving everything. He spent hours in the den, the blue light of the monitors reflecting in his eyes, talking in low, urgent tones into a headset. I could hear him mentioning the dip and liquidity events. He was gambling with the roof over our heads, and he did it with the confidence of a man who thought he was the smartest person in the room. The breaking point wasn't a fight. It was a piece of paper. A notice arrived from the mortgage company about the home equity line of credit. The interest rate had adjusted, and the monthly payment had jumped by another $800. Joseph had hidden the adjustment notice in the recycling bin, buried under a pile of junk mail. Finding that paper didn't make me angry. It just made me tired. I realized that as long as I stayed in this house, I was just an accomplice to my own financial ruin. The opportunity came on Sunday. Joseph had a fantasy football draft with a group of guys from his old firm. He'd been talking about it for weeks, treating it like a professional commitment. He spent an hour getting ready and splashed on cologne that smelled way too strong for a Sunday afternoon, acting as if everything were normal. I'll be back by 7, he said, kissing my cheek. He didn't notice that I was standing perfectly still, my skin crawling. Do you want me to pick up Thai food on the way home? No, I said. I'm fine. The second his car cleared the gated entrance, I moved. I had already rented a small unfurnished condo 3 towns over. A place where the HOA didn't exist and the neighbors didn't know my name. I'd spent the last 3 mornings slowly moving the most important things. The kids' documents, my jewelry, the heirloom linens, into a storage unit. Now I went back for the rest. I didn't pack everything. I only took what belonged to me. I pulled the suitcases from the attic and filled them with my clothes, my books, and the files I'd spent weeks compiling. The house felt cavernous and cold. The expensive mahogany furniture and the high ceilings suddenly felt like a stage set for a life I didn't recognize anymore. I didn't leave a long letter. I didn't explain my feelings or tell him how much he'd betrayed me. I didn't use words like trust or future. Instead, I printed out a final copy of the total liabilities spreadsheet. I laid it flat on the white marble of the kitchen island. Beside the paper, I placed my house keys. They made a small metallic clink against the stone. I walked through the house one last time, checking the closets and the drawers. I felt a strange sense of lightness, the kind you get when you finally put down a heavy suitcase you've been carrying for miles. Loading the last of the boxes into the car, I looked back at the house. It looked perfect from the outside, manicured lawn, fresh paint, the image of suburban success. Inside, it was just a pile of debt and a man who thought he could trick the world into giving him a shortcut. As I drove through the gate and onto the Beltway, the traffic was as miserable as always. Just a sea of brake lights and idling engines. I didn't mind. I just kept driving. Our golden retriever Buster stayed with me. He spent the first few nights in the new condo, pacing the length of the living room, his nails clicking on the linoleum. Every evening at 6 p.m., he would trot over to the front door and sit, his head tilted, waiting for the sound of Joseph's car in the driveway. By the second week, he stopped sitting. He just curled up on the rug and slept through the evening, getting used to the quiet. Thank you so much, Lisa, for trusting us with your story and sharing such an intimate look into your life. It is truly devastating to hear how Joseph and Victoria Bauer managed to betray your trust so completely, turning your home and home into a house of secrets and financial ruin, while you were simply trying to be the rock for your family. The strength it took for her to walk away from that curated, perfect life to start over in a small condo is honestly inspiring. But now, I want to hear from all of you. Lisa left Joseph with nothing but the keys and a spreadsheet of his own failures, leaving him to face the PTA board and the mortgage company on his own. Do you think she made the right move by cutting ties immediately for her own peace of mind? Is sad. Or should she have stayed to fight for every last cent of the remaining equity through a legal battle before disappearing? Let us know your thoughts and leave your best advice for Lisa in the comments below. If you found this story wild, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an upload. We'll see you in the next one.